Okay, good evening, everyone. Dawn Coleman, William Gillison, Kelly Pardue, and Anna Sprout came together and worked on this presentation for you about diversity and learning in online environments. Here's some of the things that we're going to be discussing tonight. We all know that diversity exists within every classroom, whether it's seated or online. But tonight we're going to be particularly discussing online learning environments and how we can best serve our learners in that environment. We're going to talk to you about barriers to access and success. We're also going to present some opportunities in helping you with teaching methodologies for diverse learners. And we'll wrap it up with some recommendations that will hopefully help you down the road with your career in higher education. So as you can see, it is an issue of how we can best serve our diverse learners in an online learning environment. This is an example of just that. This shows the diversity in our world. This came from the Adult Development and Learning book from Dr. Bonham's class, and it really hit our class when we took that because it does show that diversity is not just race, it's age, it's ability, it's education. And I was really surprised in this chart to see that only 12% of people in the world have a home computer and 30% are internet users. So the diversity in the world shows that we do have a challenge, and we want to help promote flexibility and convenience for folks to be able to learn in an online environment. And that means that we're going to have to improve access to higher education for diverse populations. And we say that, but how do we do that? Access denied. We're going to talk about learning and access. Online learning is not narrowing the achievement gap between the various population groups. It's still a problem that's alive and well. We're going to start with a short video to get us moving in the right direction. Here it is.
The digital divide is a mother that's 45 years old and can't get a job because she doesn't know how to use a computer. It is an immigrant that doesn't know that he can call his family for free. It is a child that can't resolve his homework because he doesn't have access to information. Digital divide is a new illiteracy. Digital divide is also defined as the gap between individuals and communities that have access to information technologies and those that don't. Why does this happen? It happens because of three things. The first is that people can't get access to these technologies because they can't afford them. The second is because they don't know how to use them. And the third is because they don't know the benefits derived from technology. So let's consider some very basic statistics. The population of the world is nearly 7 billion people. Out of these, approximately 2 billion are digitally included. This is approximately 30% of the entire world population, which means that the remaining 70% of the world, close to 5 billion people, do not have access to a computer or the internet. Let's think about that number for a second. 5 billion people. That's 4 times the population of India that have never touched a computer, have never accessed internet. So this is a digital abyss that we're talking about. This is not a digital divide. Here we can see a map by Chris Harrison that shows the internet connections around the world. What we can see is that most of the internet connections are centered on North America and Europe, while the rest of the world is engulfed in the dark shadow of digital divide. Next, we can see connections city to city around the world, and we can see that most of the information generated is being generated between North America and Europe, while the rest of the world is not broadcasting their ideas or information. And so, what does this mean? We are living in a world that seems to be having a digital revolution. A revolution that everyone here thinks that we're part of, but the 70% of the world that is digitally excluded is not part of this. What does this mean? Well, the people that will be digitally excluded won't be able to compete in the labor markets of the future. They won't be connected. They'll be less informed. They'll be less inspired. And they'll be less responsible. Internet should not be a luxury.
As the video shows, there are barriers we have to cross before online education is not only available to all, but inclusive of all. The digital divide can be caused by a multitude of factors. Today, we're going to be looking at how economic status can affect access to online education, The cultural differences in education, the lack of engagement experienced by student learners, the type of student seeking online education, and how the instructional design can keep learners from completing a course. The digital divide concerns access to technology. Certain demographics have greater access to technology than others. Thus, they have an advantage. In learning the skills to be successful in our technological age, the digital divide is apparent within our own country. As this image shows, there is a discrepancy between households that have access to internet and those that don't. The digital divide is created by a number of issues, from social inequalities, geographic area, economic barriers, and societies. It is important as educators to understand that not every student has access to technology that would make them successful with an online course. Low-income population and various groups often do not have experience using various technologies, and as such are less likely to succeed when taking an online course because they have not built up the skills to utilize programs with ease. Less privileged individuals are not prepared to compete in our technologically driven world. Technology is largely dominated by Western ideologies and the English language. Oftentimes, non-Western cultures are overwhelmed when it comes to communicating knowledge via electronic media. In fact, as the Western culture continues to dominate it, it can unintentionally create incentives for non-Western cultures to adopt Western trends and shift away from their unique cultural traditions. In addition, the Western culture is based on individualism and values autonomy, personal goals, and independent beliefs. Often, Western cultures analyze the world in a mechanistic way to increase efficiency within a capitalistic world. In contrast, non-Western cultures are often directed by group cooperation and is based in social responsibilities. The holistic approach to learning permeates non-Western cultures, where there is an emphasis on learning as a means to accomplishing a common goal. The dominance of Western ideologies can negatively impact an individual's success in online courses due to the lack of cultural inclusion. Creating a sense of community is important for online learners, especially as Western ideologies continue to dominate online education and as our learner base grows. It is important for us as educators to recognize the type of assistance we need to provide and encourage in our students. Creating a sense of online social presence can engage students from multiple backgrounds and learning styles to share and learn from each other. However, with online classes, students can feel more isolated from their instructors and fellow learners. The lack of community can lead to negative feelings for online learning. Often, online courses are utilized by non-traditional students who have life experiences and outside responsibilities. These students may seek an opportunity to improve their knowledge base while juggling a full-time job, children, and relationships. However, the drive to succeed does not dictate the outcome of education. Non-traditional students are less likely to complete their online courses than a traditional student. The design of a course can determine the level of students' involvement. Poorly designed courses are less likely to engage the learner due to the lack of connection experienced by the learner. This can be due to various reasons. Sometimes the teacher is not engaging enough. Other times there is an assumption that students can learn similar to how the instructor learns, and as such, courses are not designed for student success. This assumption can lead to negative views of online education. Designers and educators have to consider all learning styles when designing effective courses.
So when we thought about the issue of diversity and learning in online environments, we saw an opportunity to incorporate more culturally responsive teaching strategies. One definition of culturally responsive teaching is that CRT is using the cultural knowledge, prior experiences, frames of reference, and performance styles of ethnically diverse students to make learning encounters more relevant to and effective for them. However, culturally responsive teaching is not about teaching a different way for each racial or ethnic group. And culture doesn't refer only to easily identifiable physical characteristics like race. Instead, culture can refer more broadly to the idea that we all have different frames of references and backgrounds. And one of the things we've spent a lot of time reading about in this class is how to engage and motivate students in online environments. And that's the focus of culturally responsive teaching. I mean, the key question in culturally responsive teaching is how can we encourage and support the intrinsic motivation of our diverse learners? So one of the ways we can do this is to use the motivational framework for culturally responsive teaching. Most discussions of culturally responsive teaching focus more on K through 12, but the motivational framework that we're going to be talking about here is designed more specifically for higher education. So it also incorporates some adult learning theories. So the motivational framework for culturally responsive teaching is a holistic model designed to provide guidance for creating learning environments that are inherently motivating to a wide variety of learners. It's not designed specifically for online learning environments, but the concepts are still applicable, and especially a lot of the strategies and techniques that you use in CRT are really easily adaptable to online learning environments. So this is the framework, and I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because we're going to talk about each one of them in detail in a second. So starting in the top left with inclusion, one of the components of the motivational framework is inclusion. And the goal there is to try to figure out how can we develop a community of learners who feel respected and connected to one another. Another component is to develop a positive attitude towards learning. So how can we create environments that incorporate choice and personal relevance to encourage a positive attitude towards learning? And then the third component is creating meaning. So how can we create environments that are engaging and challenging and include diverse perspectives of our learners? And then finally, how can we foster competence? So how can we create environments that foster an understanding that learners are effectively learning something that they value? So going through each of the four components really quickly here. With inclusion, the emphasis is on the diverse perspectives of learners and learning through collaboration and cooperation, and creating an environment where learners feel comfortable pointing out where they do feel marginalized. And some of the activities and strategies that you can use for this is collaborative and cooperative learning, peer review, and multidimensional sharing. So, I mean, with the multidimensional sharing, that's basically the idea of actually getting to know your classmates as real human beings, which can sometimes be challenging in an online environment. But if we want to create presence and engagement in the online environment, we really need to be able to view our classmates as human beings. So that's where the multidimensional sharing piece comes in, and the importance of creating inclusion. Oh, and I should note that there's a lot of activities and strategies that are suggested in culturally responsive teaching, but we kind of selected some that we thought were especially applicable to online environments. We can encourage a positive attitude towards learning through using contextualized learning activities that reflect learners' diversity of experiences and ways of learning, and by giving learners a choice in what and how they learn. And some activities for that, or strategies, include fair and clear criteria for evaluation, approaches based on multiple intelligences, experiential learning, and teacher-learner conferences. We can create meaning by offering challenging learning experiences that connect to real-world issues, and issues for our diverse learners, not just what we consider to be important real-world issues. And also by having an awareness of differences in language and communication so that the teacher's voice doesn't dominate the learning environment. And some strategies for this include role-playing in games, using case study methods, and projects. Finally, we can foster competence by using assessment that is connected to learners' frame of reference, and assessments that allow learners to demonstrate that they have effectively learned through various means. I mean, this really ties back to a lot of our readings where we learned about formative and summative assessments, and how you really kind of want to target learners' different ways of demonstrating that they have learned. So some strategies for this is formative feedback, alternatives to pencil and paper tests, and self-assessment opportunities.
The following group of slides will be dedicated to the recommendations that we have after going through the material in this course in ways to better the experience for the instructor as well as the student. The first issue would be digital divide. It's important to let the students know exactly what the course technologically demands of them and what they will need to be successful in the course. We discussed high-speed internet. Is there mobile access involved with the course? And if so, who in the class has the ability to access it? Will it be something that you can complete in a public space, or will it be something that you need to do privately where you're going to need to, use your microphone and use maybe even your camera on your computer like you would in Google Hangout? And will the student have the ability to access the tools when and where they need to? This would be important in a case of, having, just like we do in OpenQuack, our course being open to where we can access it whenever we need to, and go in and kind of check for things that the instructor has posted or something that they've left behind that we may need. It's important to try to get a gauge on the students at the very beginning of the class to know how successful they may or may not necessarily be even before they take the class, as to their access that they have and the tools that they have to succeed in the class. Presence is one of the most important things, if not the most important thing, in creating a kind of solid culture and camaraderie with your students in the classroom. The importance of presence cannot be overstated, because if a student feels disconnected from the course, even if it's a seated course as opposed to an online course, they're going to not be interested, not be successful, not be involved. And I think the importance of creating an environment of inclusion and having a really good presence as the instructor in the course is the most important thing for an online course. Being able to answer a student's questions pretty quickly, whether or not that's through an audible chat or a text chat, always being available for the students. Even the way you're communicating audibly with the students any deviation in that could make it better or worse, just as far as, engagement. Engagement is important in ways that it will not only increase the attentiveness of the student, but the involvement of the student as well, and getting them to do certain things, just like we've done in our course, breaking up into smaller groups, going during class time and meeting with our groups, having our own kind of independent discussions away from the rest of the class have been important to our growth and engagement within the course. One of the things that we pointed out that would be a good recommendation for the future is use various modes of communication. Don't limit your course to one instructional vehicle. It's important to, get the students engaged by using things that they may not be used to using, and they have to put a little bit more work into using, which increases their engagement. I think that just using OpenQuack in this course and taking the time outside of the classroom to meet with our group in Google Hangouts has caused a lot more engagement on my part than may have been even in a seated course, because of the extra time and effort that went into learning how to use the programs and being involved with the program and making sure that I was there at a certain time and could stay for a certain amount of time. It's very important in the process of engagement to add things that the student may not be comfortable with at first and grow in that and learn in that. Outside of responsibilities, it's kind of unique to online courses. Every one of your students and even yourself have things that are going on while you're logged in on the computer, if that's how you are meeting. There were instances in our class, someone needed to let their dog out, or someone needed to feed their dog, watch their kids, put their kids to sleep, anything like that. You have to realize as an instructor that those things are going to be going on. You have to kind of prepare for that. Just like in our course, our 3-hour course, a lot of times we would have, the 15-minute break in the middle of it. It's just important to, set time aside for certain things like that, just in case other responsibilities need to be taken care of while in the class, in the the designated class time. One thing that always found interesting is the majority of people taking online courses are adults. The majority of them, work throughout the day and are in class at night, and it's important to realize that this time that they have dedicated to their class is also the time that they have throughout their day to take care of things before their next work day begins, which is probably the very next day. They have 3 or 4 hours at night that they can dedicate to getting ready for the following day, and while during that time they're also in a course. It's important as an instructor to realize that there's a lot of other things going on outside of the classroom in the class meeting time, and just to be wary of that and to know it's not always going to run as smoothly as you may like it to, and not everyone's going to be at 110% the entire 3-hour course, or even a shorter course. Instructional design kind of goes hand in hand with everything that we've already talked about. Focus on using various modes of delivering the material in order to increase involvement and engagement. Just like we talked about, using OpenQuack, and we used Facebook. I know my group, we use Google Hangouts, and just using 3 or 4 different methods of, accessing information and processing the information, just become more and more involved and engaging, which has helped, I guess, more than anything, me learning the material in the course. Make sure the materials that you use are readily accessible and instructions are clearly defined. Just like in OpenQuack, we had 2 or 3 in our course, and in OpenQuack, we would go in OpenQuack, everything would be posted on the walls that we needed to have access to throughout the discussion in the course. We had As You Learn, Facebook, and everything was, clearly pointed out and what we needed to do. It's important for, I guess, individual completion and participation within the course. Accessibility and clearly defined instructions are paramount. Establish clear guidelines. Make sure that each individual student has the ability to contact you in case the need arises. Always being available to your students, I think, is probably one of the most highly recommended things there could possibly be for an online course, because if you're in a seated course, hey, I'll run into the teacher tomorrow, I'll stop and talk to them in person, I could stop by their office and speak to them. That's not always the case. So having your office hours, which may only be, a certain window that they can call in, is very important. And having your email there, having, even a personal telephone number that they could call you on in case they needed to speak to you would be recommended. Class may not be seated, and the student may not be able to simply ask you in person, which is a lot easier than picking up a phone and calling somebody. And it just seems like the student really, really needs to speak to you. They will figure out a way to do it. Just make sure you're available for it.
We have to think that technology is something that can modify according to human processes. I want to share a story. In 2006, I went to live here. This is one of the poorest communities in all of Mexico. I went to film a documentary on the people that live off trash, entirely off trash. Their houses are built with trash. They eat trash. They dress in trash. And after 2 months of living with them, of seeing the children and the way they work, I understood that the only thing that can change and that can break the poverty cycle is education. And we can use technology to bring education to these communities. Here's another shot. And the main message is that technology is not going to save the world. We are, and we can use technology to help us. I'm sure everybody here has experienced it. What moves technology is human energy. So let's use this energy to make the world a better place. Thank you.